Being an entrepreneur is so much more than that. I believe it's about passion. It's about recognizing opportunities and generating innovative, creative ideas to fulfill or to live out one's passion.
Hi, and welcome to the Thoughtful Talent Show. I'm Jen Werner of Jen Werner Coaching.
And I'm Chad Ahern of Talent Teams Consulting. This season, we're welcoming fellow coaches back to the show to explore how people can move beyond naming and claiming their talents and start to aim their talents. We're calling this season Strengths Applied. Today, we're here to talk about entrepreneurship with our good friend, Bill Beachy from the Beachy Group. Bill, welcome back to the show.
Oh, thanks so much. It's
Welcome
good to be back with you folks. Love it. Love it.
Nice to
Yeah,
see
we're
you
so
here.
excited to have you.
Yeah. For our listeners, you may recognize Bill from previous episodes in our season one. I believe he helped us with our ideation episode, and I think
futuristic.
the futuristic, right? Bill's top 5 CliftonStrengths are strategic, ideation, activator, maximizer, and futuristic. And of course, as always, we'll have his contact information in our show notes. Today, as I said, we're here to talk about entrepreneurship. And one of the big reasons Jen and I wanted to bring Bill on was that we've seen and talked to a lot of our network and seen entrepreneurship growing. Quick stat to start us off. My analytical loves to show up with those. In January 2025, the end of this year, just over 390,000 new business applications are submitted here in the US. Okay, so this is a growing topic. Jen, I know you have some insight on why this is important to you, why you think that we should be talking about this. You care to share?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've all seen the workforce shift, right? We've been talking about this for a while, from striving for a paycheck to striving for a purpose. And to draw the draw of creating that role, that job, or the balance in your life has done nothing but get stronger. So starting your own business, while it can be extremely hard work, it is also very rewarding to know that every day you are knowing your purpose and your values are completely center to what you do.
So to start us off, Bill, we invited you on to talk about entrepreneurship. You have some experience with this. Care to share what's been your experience with being an entrepreneur and starting some businesses?
Yeah. Well, let me, if I could, and again, thank you for allowing me to be a part of this entrepreneurship. It's near and dear to me. I need to give you a little bit of context. So what I want to do is look back, and then I'm going to point to the strengths that I utilized in some of those early years and provide a little bit of context. So
No.
my dad was a tenant farmer, okay, back when I was a kid. And while we rarely went without, we rarely had extra. Now, a tenant farmer is somebody who doesn't own the farm, but rather farms the farm for the landlord, and then you split the profits. So we rarely had extra, but there were some extras that I wanted as a kid. I wanted a bike, I wanted a baseball glove, a bat, a basketball hoop. It didn't have to be fancy, but it did need to be functional. And I've always had the eye for an eye for opportunity, but in rural areas where I lived, there wasn't much opportunity to develop cash flow or start a business. So at 8 or 9 years old, I wanted a bicycle, and I convinced my parents to let me become, now hear this, you may not ever heard this before, a burpee seed salesman. You would get in touch with the burpee seed company. They'd send you packets of seed, and then for a certain amount, and then you go out and sell them door to door. And that's what I did. My folks bought me a 24-inch single gear Western Flyer bike at the local Western auto store, and I used it to ride up and down the country roads to sell my seeds and pay off my debt to my parents. In addition to that, my dad would cut and split wood, cords of wood. We lived on a dairy farm, and he would cut cords of wood and deliver it. And I still have the steel wedges for splitting those. $15 for a cord of wood. Now, a cord of wood is 4 feet wide, 4 feet tall, and 8 feet long. And we delivered it and stacked it for $15. And I would get a small stipend for helping him out with that. At 12 years old, my dad left the tenant farm and he bought a small diner. and I became a professional dishwasher. A dollar, a
And
dollar,
there.
tw yeah, $1.25 an hour. Now, with inflation today, that'd be about 13 bucks an hour. And then when I was 13, he wanted to start a takeout and deliver pizza business out of the diner. And so I helped develop that and run that through high school, working nights and weekends. Now, by the time I was 15, I'd saved about $1,000. Now, today with inflation, that's about 10 grand. And that
No,
was
that's
enough
not
money.
bad.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
was enough money to purchase a 10-year-old car and have it redone, body work and paint and motor and transmission, tires and wheels, and I made it into a hot rod. Okay. So I drove
Nice.
that for about 5 years. All through high school, I paid for my own transportation, car insurance, bought my own clothes, very independent, and was continually looking for opportunity to develop cash flow to make it on my own. I graduated from high school at 17, went to college, never lived at my parents' home full time after that. It seemed like I always figured out how to respond to opportunities, and trying to make a living was responding to necessity. Got married at 20. Between myself and my wife, we did two bachelor's degrees, three master's degrees, and a PhD. And throughout all that, we only borrowed $2,500. Okay.
Wow.
Now, I worked for a concrete contractor. I drove school buses. I swept floors in a factory, sold encyclopedias door to door, drove a catering truck. I was a merchandiser for a magazine, worked construction, worked in a pizza shop, and I even did music concerts. When I was working on
Okay.
my first master's degree at seminary, I lived on the first floor apartment in a small town in Kentucky, and there was no pizza place in that town. So I tapped into my restaurant experience. I made up a little menu, and I put signs up on the bulletin boards at all the college dormitories, and I sold pizzas to college kids out my living room window.
Oh my
And then
gosh.
Oh,
and then
nice. Okay.
and there was the what was it, the health agency, the of the local county never did find out about it, which is good. On the weekends, I'd travel as much as 1,000 miles round trip doing concerts in various venues, primarily churches. Created a nonprofit organization, board of directors, and money from the concerts went into the organization. That I received a monthly stipend or a monthly salary.
Nice.
In addition to that, I recorded music, produced tapes and albums, had T-shirts and hats made to have merchandise to sell at these concerts to supplement my salary. Did work study in the audio department of the library, applied for grant scholarships,
Yeah.
developed a base of people who gave to the nonprofit. We sponsored a missionary, sent kids to youth camps, sought to interface with youth programs at churches and parachurch organizations. And when I finished that part of my education and began to work full time, I gave the nonprofit to another person who was pursuing the things for which the nonprofit was created. So, after having lived in 6 different states, I finally settled down with a full time profession at age 32 in West Texas. But 3 years later, moved my family across the country to Pittsburgh, where I did another graduate degree at Duquesne University. This is what I was doing that I believe as I look back in those first
Yeah.
32 years. I was searching for the answer to the universal question: who am I and why am I here? And what I found out is that there is always more to discover about oneself and the fulfillment of what I would call one's foundational life calling that is always unfolding. Jen, you talked about purpose and meaning. Yes, when we are locked into fulfilling what it is that we're designed and wired to do, there can be purpose and meaning.
It's really interesting you mentioned that, Bill,
So
because
great.
in prepping for this, I came across a bunch of different stats about what's going on in the entrepreneurial world right now. I
Mm-hmm.
came across this really interesting one that while you were doing that, all some of your experiences are dating yourself a little bit, but
Yeah, yeah.
all very, very appropriate for where you have come
Sure.
in life.
Mm.
But related, Gen Z workers now are showing a massive propensity for entrepreneurship. There's a stat out. Found this in Entrepreneur magazine of all places. Surprise, surprise.
Mm-hmm.
90% of Gen Zers say they want to create something new and better for the world. So
Mm-hmm.
to combining Jen's point about mission and having purpose, and what you were just saying about sort of what has driven you for a lot of your entrepreneurial venture, it seems to be a universal, um, you know, generational agnostic
Yeah.
principle that it's everybody wants this, right?
Yeah.
It's and what's also interesting is that that same article quotes that saying a staggering 75% of survey respondents between the ages of 18 and 25, which is kind of the period you just covered, ultimately want to become entrepreneurs. So it's actually growing. You maybe might have been the outlier in your generation, but it is becoming more and more prevalent, especially amongst our newest workers.
Yeah.
So it's just interesting to see the generational overlap, that this is a recurring thing. It's just continue to grow.
Yeah, we just
So,
didn't know it was called entrepreneur back in my day.
Right.
Yeah.
Jen, it looked like you said that you wanted to respond to something Bill had said in his wonderful little layout of his entrepreneurial history there.
There's so much that I'm just in awe of, because unlike Bill, I didn't ever have dreams of doing things on my own or having my own business. I'm a doer. So you tell me what to do and I'll get it done, right? So I'm not the idea person. Like I'm like, yeah, definitely this does not lean to my strengths. So it was just really interesting to listen to knowing Bill's talents, and then like seeing them even as a kid, like they were so alive in him. With me being that independent worker, I really do prefer to work alone. And I found that having the ability to start and complete things totally on my own is so rewarding. Like that's where I feel like I've really come into this since starting my own business and being able to do what I want to do instead of what other people want me to do. I'm able to work as long and as hard as I want. There's no one telling me what I should be getting done or what I can do. It's completely up to me, with having all of the authority to just begin if that's the idea I have. So yeah, just love seeing the differences in us. I'd love to hear about your experience, Chad.
In terms of being an entrepreneur, I mean,
absolutely.
I am a little bit in your camp, Jen. I alluded to the fact that I was a dishwasher, but that was like just my first true paid job.
Right.
I grew up on a farm as well, but that was a lot of just you handled the hay bales because Dad needed you to handle the hay bales. But when I got around to working, it was I worked at a restaurant, and then I went off to college and I did various work study, work in our volunteer efforts office, and then got into the professional world. I thought I was going to be in higher ed for a long time, and then just based on some changes that happened, this is about 10 years ago, I was starting to realize that like my talents weren't really being fed. I have learner and deliberative and responsibility, and a lot like you, I'm a little bit on the doer side. I do have some thinking themes that make me maybe think a little bit bigger, but I started my coaching business as my first entrepreneurial venture, essentially because my talents weren't being fed. In the grand scheme, they were being fed in part, but like you, I have high responsibility. I like to kind of be given projects and do them my own way on on the timelines that are required.
Right.
But that I'm given sole responsibility. And I like being on a team when it works, but when it doesn't, that starts to fall apart for me. I've got discipline in there, in my number 6. So that's been sort of my experience with entrepreneurship. I want to actually go back to Bill's something you'd mentioned, Jen, about just hearing his themes come through. All I kept hearing of Bill, and this is I'm commending you here, is ideation and strategic, like always seeing a path, always having an idea for it. That maximizer, probably an activator, probably helped you get moving in the right direction and made the most of it. But boy, that strategic and ideation combo just coming through over and over. Oh, you're in a college town, make pizza, find the bulletin boards. And then just having the idea that if you're out in the Midwest farm country, you'll be able to find those that seed business and getting those out to your local your neighbors and so forth. So into his community. So I thought that was fantastic. I guess I want to build on that, is sort of which of your talents have proven most helpful in you being an entrepreneur? And are there ones that,
Mm,
like I highlight strategic and ideation, are there other ones that you find are really helpful? Really,
mm,
as you've started the Beachy Group,
right.
and done much more coaching, that's how Jen and I know you.
Yeah,
I'm kind of curious. Can you talk to us a little bit about how your themes have
sure.
come through in terms of um, being helpful?
Right, right. Well, and that's a great question. Of course, back in the days that I was talking about, I didn't have the language of CliftonStrengths.
Right.
But as I understand them now, I believe that just like you were saying, Chad, all my top five were at play. I would look ahead and I'd realize that the current work that I had was going to end, and I needed something, some way to have some cash flow, figure out how to make a living to pay my expenses and develop the next step. That was my futuristic. I was able to look out there. I would get an idea to develop an opportunity for cash flow. It was always legal. It was always legal, and that's my ideation. And then I would create a plan to fulfill that. That's the strategic. I would implement the plan. That's my activator. And I always sought to maximize the potential of whatever endeavor it was, and would make adjustments along the way to seek to produce the best outcome for me. And I have to say that the additional strengths down through, I think, about 13 or 14 added to the success of those endeavors. And again, looking at in hindsight, because I have relator and learner and arranger and intellection, input, self-assurance, positivity, achievers in there as well. So all of those things, I can look back and just go, yep, yep, that's what I did. Yes, okay, yeah, that was there, and just kind of scroll back through. And that's, I'd encourage everybody really to do that, because if you can do that and look back in the context, of growing up and look at your top five and go, where did I utilize these? That it's going to make them that much more powerful for you in the present context,
Mm.
as you look at how you utilize them, the successes that you had, the failures that you had, you picked yourself up, dusted yourself off, moved on, and went, that didn't work, but maybe let's try this, whatever it might be. And I would certainly encourage entrepreneurs to do that.
That's great advice. Bill, I love that. And you hit it. Like I heard your futuristic always in there, like looking for the next thing. And it's one of the things that I've reached out to you the most about, the ideation and futuristic, because those are, and strategic, those are very, very low for me. And so it's so wonderful that you mentioned, like maybe take a moment to look back, and yeah, I don't do that. I also don't look forward. So my context and futuristic are all in the 30s, so like the fact is I'm a live in today kind of girl, and my talents follow that so much. So I just love you like saying that. Now it makes me like want to go back and go through everything I've done, up until today, to see where my talents were coming through. I definitely know my doer talents were, my executing talents were always on fire. Chad, do you mind if I share, where my talents have helped me?
No, that's a great place to go next, because you're already beating it,
kind of getting there
on that. So.
Okay, well, I feel like my executing and influencing talents actually have been really loving the opportunity to quickly act on ideas and then work as long and hard as I want to complete them. So you guys may know, and if you don't remember, I'm going to tell you now. My top five are responsibility, achiever, belief, deliberative, and activator. So I would say in my work and what I do now, I would say that my belief is fed every single day, knowing that I'm doing what speaks directly to my values, and that I'm able to act out those every single day in everyone I touch and everyone I work with. So I've just loved being an entrepreneur and actually spending the time building my business, doing what's meaningful for me. My activator, you've heard it over and over already in this, like being able to quickly jump on things. I will say that now that's kind of fed into everything else I do. If someone gives me an idea, I'm instantly ready to act on it, even if it's not about my business. But because I'm using that activator talent every day. Yeah, I have an idea. Someone says something to me about something, and I was like, how could I use that? I'm instantly putting that into practice. And those two, the activator and achiever together, are just loving it. Because as soon as someone gives me an idea, even if it wasn't for me and it was for someone else, or I'm hearing about someone else, how they did something, I'm like, ooh, how could I do that? And then, oh, let's get started. So, and then spending all my time on it. So I, really, truly, my only limitation is money. So that would be like my investment in myself and how much of my time that I really want to dedicate to my business. Because I'm finding now that if I'm not careful, every minute of every waking day, I will spend doing and be so happy to do it. I no longer feel like 60-hour work week, 80-hour work week is ridiculous. I'm like, sure. What else could we do? What else can I add to my to-do list? Can we work from 6 in the morning until 8 p.m.? Sure, if you want to. But that's maybe not so great for my family life. So it's just finding that good balance for me. I think is those are the two things, really, money and time. And I just need to, do the right things for my business. So I've loved my talents contribution to entrepreneurship for me.
Yeah.
Good for you.
Thanks.
Yeah, it's so interesting to, I've gotten to know you, Jen. You've already mentioned you're in the moment woman.
Yeah.
And to hear you talk about that activator achiever just reinforces that it's so much about like sort of the idea right in front of you. And it's wonderful to hear that you're tapping into Bill's ideation for some of that. I While you and I have some similarities, Ben and I have some similarities, Bill, I will also say some of your top 5 are probably a little further down the list in my own order, but that's what makes this an interesting conversation, is that we're all entrepreneurs. We're all coming at this at slightly different angles. For me, it's been primarily my learner. My learner has just been super fed in entrepreneurship, because of I need to learn how to do all the things. I plan on a really long career in higher ed or nonprofits. And yes, there are aspects of the roles that I had that I consistently learned, but then I kind of got to some plateaus. And learners don't like plateaus, especially learning plateaus. And so one of the interesting things has been for me in terms of starting my business is just learning how to do all the things. You got to figure out, what accounting software you're going to use, or how to best reach, do outreach, how to utilize LinkedIn in the right way, so that your message is out there and people know what you're doing, and everything that goes with it. One of the other talent themes I've been leaning into more recently is really tapping into my number 6, which is my discipline, and figuring out, okay, how do I sort of block out my time? Jen talked about you can work from dusk till dawn, or dawn till dusk. Sorry, I got that phrase turned around.
Or both, Chad, or both.
24/7. From dawn till dusk on your business, but figuring out, how to utilize that time most effectively. I too have a family that I'd like to be around, and figuring out, how do you block in time for family, especially when the kids start coming home from school each day. And so, how to capitalize on that time has been really impactful. And then also, just the responsibility part of making sure that you're responding to clients in the right way with the right information. And that, again, my learner comes back around. We talked about this in the learner episode in season 1, is, I not only need to take in information, but I also need opportunities to sort of bring it out and to share it.
Yeah.
And so my learner has also been fed by the fact that now I'm in a position where I have a lot more opportunities to get out there and share information. That's really sort of fed my entrepreneurial venture and the excitement I have around doing what I'm doing. And again, going to that purpose and mission piece.
Yeah.
But yeah, those are the two I would sort of tap into specifically. My deliberative shows up, maybe not as I'm not as inventive or spur of the moment as maybe the two of you, but my deliberative tends to make me, think it through before I act, which is, I think, for some entrepreneurs is not necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah.
But because you can dig yourselves in some pretty good holes pretty quickly.
Chad, can you remind us what your top 5 are?
Oh yeah, sure. So learners number one, just mentioned that one. Deliberative number two, responsibility, harmony, and analytical. And then of course I mentioned my discipline at number six.
Right.
My harmony too is a really good one for entrepreneurs because it finds the practical side of things. I can
Yeah.
get all wrapped up in the emotion of, the excitement of doing something new, or the emotion of being maybe turned down for a particular engagement, but that harmony really helps think about, okay, what practically happens next. That goes to the way that the two of you have talked about, getting into action and making sure that action stays positive and progressive.
Yeah. That sounds great. I love this conversation because as you and I've alluded to, like we started this podcast because of our responsibility and deliberative like connection, the fact that we both had those. And then we're like surrounding them out with some little different things. I have a little more influencing themes in there and a couple other executing. You have more strategic themes in there and a little more relationship building. But seeing how like all of our talents have really led us, along this journey, and that we're all using them, even though like I so want Bill's futuristic and ideation, but I don't know if I'd trade them for what I have, like there's that.
Yeah.
And boy, do I want Chad's discipline, but also again, like, what would I trade it for? I don't think I would. So I just love that we're really having this conversation about, how all of us are using our talents to do very similar things. I mean, we're all coaches. We're all like leaning to help people see who they are and be the best, bring out the best in themselves and others around them. So I love that we're tapping into how we're doing that individually. I would love to go to our next question, which is really in like, for me, I want to talk about the places where people struggle to be seen or heard. And so especially as an entrepreneur, we may be like new at this role, or we're kind of new coming into the market. Bill, what advice or what are some tips that you could offer to someone who's in their new entrepreneurship business and then struggling to be seen and heard?
Sure. And you just use two operative words together that I think help us, that focus us in on a side of entrepreneurship that we need to be broader. And that is that general
Sure.
definition, it's tied into the description of a person who starts a business willing to risk loss in order to make money, that entrepreneur.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
believe being an entrepreneur is so much more than that. I believe it's about passion. It's about recognizing opportunities and generating innovative, creative ideas to fulfill or to live out one's passion. And so a person who has passion for possibly, say, helping people in the health industry, they will figure out how to fulfill that passion that drives them and figure out ways to position themselves so that they can help people in that area. And I think the first step, and we just came out of a great conversation about each one of our different strengths, that the first step is to know yourself.
Yeah.
How are you wired? What motivates you? What drives you? And discover that what I would term that foundational life calling, that emerges and unfolds over a lifetime, and then position yourself so that you can fulfill that calling and have a great sense of meaning and purpose. Now, you may not create the next technological phenomenon, you may not become wealthy, but
Right.
really that's not the point. That's not the point. The point is to live life to the complete extent of how you are designed. And it's in that space where you'll find peace and meaning and purpose.
Oh, Bill, you're speaking to all my feels. I love it. I love it so much. That positioning yourself is such a big key part. And if you don't know who you are and you don't know where you're headed or what's important to you, it's so hard to put yourself in those positions that are good for you, that will help you fulfill that mission. So I just love that so much. Chad,
I have to say, what's that?
give me it.
So I love what both of you just said, but I think, Bill, one of the other big ideas that you just highlighted is that that sort of narrow definition of entrepreneurship. I think in our current culture, and I'm not going to make this podcast political, but just think about some of the big tech titans that have been in the news recently. You talk about Zuckerberg, you talk about Elon Musk, you talk about Jeff Bezos. Those are even Bill Gates, back when Microsoft was initially founded, that was an entrepreneurial venture when Bill Gates started that. You look at Apple and, where Steve Jobs and Wozniak started. That tends to get sort of like the highlight of entrepreneurship, the sort of tech or maybe even financial sort of outfits. And I think what you really highlighted there is that you need a much broader definition here. And the mission and passion side and knowing yourself and where you fit in. I think one of the other ideas I'd just like to sort of add to that, and we could probably do a whole other episode on this, but you're also to a certain extent talking about entrepreneurship too, is you don't necessarily have to start a brand new venture like Jen and I and Bill have. But if you're listening to this and thinking about, oh, I want to do something with some passion, I want to be able to feed my talents into something meaningful, that may actually happen within your organization. You just got to find the right opportunity. And, Bill, you've done a wonderful job finding it in all the communities you've been in. But sometimes that community can be your own workplace. And can you find an opportunity to contribute there in an entrepreneurial vein, but being intra to the company? I'm really glad you highlighted the broadness of what entrepreneurship could and should be, and that there are more of us that should be taking advantage of that than just the narrow definition that we're often fed.
So. Chad, I love that you brought up that entrepreneurship way, because honestly, that's how I got started coaching. That's where it started for me. Was we had taken the CliftonStrengths assessment with a new manager, and I was so overjoyed and excited about it when it changed. I'm not kidding when I say it completely changed our team to understand each other and our talents and where we worked best. I mean, GPs increased, all the stats that Gallup gives us, we saw happen. And I was like, we need to be doing this with everyone. So I, made it on my own. Like, I went and got certified. I brought it back to my company. I said, this is what I want to do. This is how I think it can help. Look, I have an example of where it already helped, let me do this. And I was so excited. It was such a giant, boosting thing for me. But then I'm like, okay, but I don't want to do my normal stuff anymore. Now I just want to do this. And that's where the rub came in. And, for me now, I moved to, I'm essentially restarted. I'm in a new area, not necessarily a new role, because I've been doing this a while. So it's not like it's a new thing. I've been a coach for 9 years as of this June. So I do know, that part of the business, but the people here are different, places are different. And the people who used to know me for office furniture. So for me, it was, they don't know, they're like, hold on, what are you doing now? Like, what's this new thing what's this new thing you're doing? And what's happening? How does this fit in with the Jen we know from the past? And I would say, as a mostly private person too, and I think that's where my deliberative comes into this. It's meant I've really needed to push myself outside my comfort zone and let people know me. So I'm going to networking events and just trying my best to get involved in things. And Bill, this is where I said, you were speaking all my feels, because I started as soon as we kind of got ourselves settled where we are here in Southern Utah now, I started going to anything I could find that meant something to me. So I was going to, women's organizations, things. I was going to policy project things where we're, there was one, it was the period project, so I'm trying to get myself all involved in all of these different things that the community is doing that was important to me. And by doing so, instead of it being like, oh, I have to go to this weird networking event, now I'm going to something that I care about, that means something to me. So this is where, if you are listening and struggling to reach out, to be outside of your comfort zone, to do something a little bigger and get yourself known, be heard and be seen, I think the easiest way is to just get involved in things that are important to you and be out in the community, because it's bringing you goodness, it's bringing the community goodness as well.
Very good.
Awesome. So, Bill, to round out our conversation here,
Yeah.
we've talked a little bit about, and actually this actually builds on what we were just talking about in terms of entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
I gonna have a two-part question. One is for new managers who might be part of an upstart entrepreneurial venture. You know, they're
Mhm.
just getting off the ground. Maybe they're just starting to manage their first couple people.
Mhm.
I'm just thinking, like, what advice would you give to them, given that you've had so many roles and we've talked about,
Mhm.
a variety of themes already. I'm kind of curious, like, what advice would you give them in terms of, whether it's leading the strengths or something else?
Mhm. Mhm. My my number one mantra for any leader is you have to have a depth of self-awareness.
Hmm.
You've got to know yourself. And that may sound trite if you keep saying it over and over, but know yourself. I've been doing this for a lot of years, and there's always something new that I can learn. Okay, so know yourself, know your strengths, your motivations, what fulfills you, develop your emotional intelligence, your self-perception, your self-expression. How do you manage stress? How do you make decisions, your interpersonal relationships? And then, and that's continual, that never stops.
Right.
You continue to be a student of yourself. But
Yeah.
then the next step is become a student of your team. And so if you're a manager, a team leader, one of the best ways for you to be successful in your way, but also for your organization, is to learn your team. What are their strengths? What are their passions? What are their sweet spots? And how can you build into them to help them fulfill their passions? And realize this, that Gallup has done research and they maintain that 70% of the engagement of your team members is based upon or dependent upon how you lead them.
Yeah.
So know yourself, how you're wired, your strengths, and then utilize that to bring meaning and purpose to your life, but also to facilitate meaning and purpose for those you lead. And it's not easy. This is not something that you trip or stumble into. It has to be done by design and
Mhm.
by intention, regardless of what your strengths are. And you've heard Chad and Jen and myself. We all talk. We have different strengths, and I'm jealous of some of the strengths that they have that I don't have. I'm not very good at. But more often than not, it's more difficult, to do this by design than simply going with the flow because it
Mhm.
takes time to think. It takes time to vision, to consider possibilities, to be teachable, to be willing to be wrong, to be willing to listen to others, and most of all, be secure in yourself and who you are.
Yeah, it's fantastic
Wonderfully
advice.
said.
Yeah, wonderfully said. And you know, my ear was both on what you were saying, but also a little bit on what you were leaving out, which is
Yeah.
that you didn't focus on, oh, just get really good at your own work or stay sort of a player on, I use a lot of sports analogies because I'm a youth soccer coach, and coaches can't be on the field, right? We can't play the game for the kids.
Right.
I think the same thing comes, to fruition when you look at a lot of, especially startups or fast strapped organizations. I work with a lot of I try and work with nonprofits, and usually they're trying to lead and manage their team, and they're both the doers and the coaches. And boy, that's a tricky mix. And so I really appreciate
Mm.
your thoughts about making sure that you're being a student of yourself and a student of your team, because they're the ones that need to go do it. You're there to help facilitate that, and your doing is the coaching, not so much the everyday work, that is often required. So I appreciate you putting the focus where it really should be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. Sure.
Jen, are there thoughts you have on whether, I mean, Bill said that so beautifully, but if,
Yeah.
I don't want to make sure we're not, stopping anything, or that there's not something you want to contribute to that.
I like what you said about like if you're the coach, you're not supposed to be the one on the field doing all the things. Like you're not supposed to be the one that's like scoring the goals for the players, because that's why you have players. And I heard something recently that I think kind of goes along with that. It's like, as we're encountering obstacles and meeting needs, So whether that's, as an entrepreneur or an entrepreneur, or you're, like a manager within a team, or you're just starting out, when we're first starting out, it might mean we have to do all the things. But so along the way, when we see a gap, we stand in the gap. Sometimes we're the bridge and we help others get, from here to there. But at the same time, we need to be thinking about how we build the bridge so that we're not always the bridge, that we're not stuck in this one place, or we're not standing in the gap forever, right? So what I loved about that was I think it's really important for us to know our limits, and then looking for where other people could be helping us, because our time is best spent doing the things that we know we do well. And, it goes back to that big strengths conversation. We all are entrepreneurs, and I'm positive, based on our talents, we are not all doing everything ourselves. And the things that we are doing ourselves are the things that we really love to do, and we might have to be doing a few other things that maybe we wouldn't love to do, but if we were making a little more money, or we had, a little extra time to do other things, like maybe we would do some other things. But I think that's the thing, right? Knowing our limits so that we can give up some of that other stuff, so that we're really spending the time on the things that's best for us to spend our time on.
And when we're starting something, there are the want to things that we do, and there are the have to things that we do. And
Right.
being willing to dive in and do whatever it is that we have to do in order to fulfill the passion that we had, the vision that we had, to fulfill this entrepreneurial dream.
Right. Yeah, that's the standing in the gap, right? We have no choice at that point. We have to do those things, and we can't really get to the next step without, just being there and doing the things that need to be done. Yeah. I love this.
Oh, this has been a great conversation, Bill.
It has.
Oh, thank you.
As are there maybe one or two key ideas that you'd just like to come back and maybe reinforce before we wrap up this episode?
Yeah. Again, the mantra that I have is self-awareness. Continue to lean into those of you who have your strengths report. Those top 5, 70% of your thinking and functioning you're going to be utilizing those top 5. You will never, ever run the well dry on what you can learn about your top 5, ever. And then even go beyond that. And then embrace that. This is who I am, and I'm okay. I'm fine. I don't have to have the deliberative like Chad has, or the responsibility. I don't have those things, or discipline. I wish that I would, but I don't. I'm a fire, aim, ready kind of person. And it's always gotten me in trouble. And I finally just went, okay, that's who I am. I'm going to learn to live within that, because that's where peace is. That's where purpose and meaning are.
Nice. I love that we came full circle on the mission and belief that Jen mentioned, and having that purpose. So thank you very much for your time, Bill. I am going to wrap us up. For our listeners, as you consider this, I, as your coach, am going to encourage you to keep playing to your strengths, just like Bill said.
And as always, be uniquely you.
If you enjoyed this episode, we encourage you to like, follow, and subscribe wherever you find your podcasts.